Pilots often entered fights already disadvantaged, and every mile of contested territory in the Solomons became a battleground where control of the air meant survival for the troops struggling below. As America joined the war in the Pacific with limited resources, the strategic situation grew increasingly dire. Japan used its air dominance to shield troop convoys, resupply distant garrisons, and disrupt Allied shipping routes. Airfields like those around Buna and Guadalcanal became lifelines, where every transport aircraft and every cargo vessel risked destruction. American commanders understood that without a decisive change in the air, the entire South Pacific campaign might falter. Aviation records from early 1940 repeatedly warned that Japanese control of the sky threatened the larger Allied plan to halt and then reverse the advance of the Empire of Japan. Intelligence evaluations confirmed that Japanese pilots had mastered turning dogfights at the altitudes where Allied fighters were forced to operate. Air warfare was evolving, yet Allied technology had not caught up. Japan entered engagements confident that no American aircraft could challenge the Zero in sustained combat. The stakes were immense. If the Allies could not regain the sky above the Solomons, then ground forces at Guadalcanal would be strangled by lack of supplies, and the long-term plan to push through New Guinea would collapse. In those tense months, the Pacific War hung in the balance, waiting for a machine that could rewrite the geometry of combat and challenge the Zero where it held every advantage. The arrival of the P-38 in late 1940 to change the atmosphere over the South Pacific. At a time when Allied supply lines were at constant risk, the new fighter offered both range and survivability. Its twin-turbo supercharged engines allowed it to climb above 20,000 feet with ease, where the A6M Zero and the Ki-43 Oscar struggled to maintain performance. Japanese pilots had grown accustomed to fighting opponents at lower altitudes, where the Zero excelled with tight turning ability and rapid acceleration. The Lightning instead introduced a battlefield that stretched vertically into the thin, cold air above the front line. Its nose-mounted combination of .450 caliber guns and a 20mm cannon created a concentrated burst of long-range fire that stunned opponents used to lightly armed American fighters. In late December over Buna, the P-38 faced its first major test. A group of American pilots intercepted Japanese aircraft at an altitude most Zero units could not reach. They struck from above, descending in lightning-fast attacks that left Japanese formations scattered. Records from the period note how the Lightning maintained its speed even in steep dives at which Zeros frequently suffered structural stress. Such engagements signaled a turning point as Japanese aviators realized for the first time that an American fighter had arrived with combat geometry far outside their expectations. Air intelligence reports from Japanese units cautiously acknowledged that the new twin-engine fighter could dictate the terms of battle rather than fall into the turning duels that had destroyed so many Allied aircraft earlier in the war. These early victories did not yet end Japanese dominance, but they marked the beginning of a shift. The P-38 brought confidence back to Allied squadrons and proved that the long-feared Zero could be challenged head-on in a style of combat it was not built to endure. Air warfare was evolving fast, and the shift toward altitude-based strategy became the defining change of the campaign. Instead of engaging in horizontal turns, American pilots climbed into towering positions above enemy formations. From January 1943 onward, P-38 units repeatedly used these positions to launch sudden diving attacks that Japanese fighters could neither predict nor counter. Veteran pilots described how a group of Lightnings could strike from 20,000 feet, plunge through a formation of Zeros at extreme speed, fire precise bursts from their concentrated nose guns, and then climb back up into the sky before the enemy could give chase. This was the pure form of boom and zoom combat, and it was a field of battle in which the Zero was outmatched. Japanese crews quickly realized that the Lightning could climb faster, dive steeper, and escape vertically in ways their aircraft simply could not replicate. Reports from surviving Japanese pilots frequently mentioned confusion, frustration, and shock at how rapidly the P-38 could appear and disappear. The old pattern of circling dogfights was collapsing under the weight of new American doctrine. During these early months, emerging aces like Richard Bong demonstrated the Lightning's potential as they scored victories by relying on energy tactics rather than tight maneuvering. Bong's early engagements became symbols of the evolving war and confirmed that altitude control, firepower, and speed were replacing turn fighting as the keys to survival. This tactical evolution shattered the confidence that had supported Japanese air superiority since 1941, and it prepared the Allies for the decisive contests still to come across New Guinea and the Solomons. In early 1943, as Allied momentum gathered force across the South Pacific, the impact of the P-38 Lightning became unmistakable. Before the United States expanded its squadrons into New Guinea and the Solomons, Japanese air groups had operated with near impunity. Now, however, the skies above the island chains were no longer guaranteed territory for the A6M Zero or the Ki-43 Oscar. More P-38 units arrived each month, bringing long-range patrol capacity, high-altitude interception ability, and the energy tactics that had already shaken Japanese confidence. Air warfare was evolving in a direction that favored Allied engineering and discipline, and the shift spread rapidly through every frontline base from Guadalcanal to Port Moresby. For the Japanese High Command, the growing presence of the Lightning created urgent problems. Intelligence officers struggled to identify and classify the new fighter's performance accurately. Some early reports even misjudged its speed by several hundred miles per hour because pilots could not comprehend how quickly it climbed and how easily it escaped combat. Formerly elite Japanese squadrons that had dominated the Pacific in 1941 and 1940 now suffered mounting losses as they attempted to intercept Allied bomber formations protected by P-38 escorts. American strategies relied heavily on altitude control and energy retention, allowing the Lightning to shield B-24 and B-25 bombers during deep raids against Japanese strongholds across northern New Guinea. Combat records show that Japanese fighters were often forced to break off attacks simply to avoid being caught in the deadly nose-mounted guns of the P-38. As more Lightnings joined the fight, Allied commanders refined a unified high-altitude doctrine. Pilots began coordinating large, sweeping attacks that disrupted Japanese formations before they could descend on airfields or shipping lanes. This protected vital resupply operations at Guadalcanal and strengthened the logistical backbone of the New Guinea campaign. Meanwhile, Japanese air groups faced fatigue, shortages of veteran pilots, and the growing realization that the Zero's design could not adapt to the new vertical battlefield created by the Lightning. Their early advantage evaporated as the Allies seized control of the aerial domain. By the middle months of 1943, Japanese air superiority in the Solomons had effectively collapsed. The P-38 Lightning had reversed a year of enemy dominance and set the conditions for a sustained Allied offensive that would push relentlessly across the Pacific toward the Philippines and beyond.